So welcome to Prioritize Your Day, Prioritize Your Life. My name is Jeannie. I'm with FCC Services. I'll introduce myself and Michelle in just a minute. I want to share a quick story to get us started here. And it's a story about Jack Welch, who was the CEO of General Electric for years and who wrote many leadership books. And I tried to actually verify this story and I couldn't verify it. So I'm not positive that it's true, except that the message that it shares with us is relevant. So just focus on the message itself and not necessarily if this actually happened or not. So Jack Welch is CEO of General Electric, and he realizes that he needs help prioritizing his day, prioritizing his time. So he hires a productivity guru, a time management guru. So this guru comes in and Jack Welch says, okay, what do I do? And the time management guy says, okay, sit down and write 3 things that you really want to get done today. 3 really important things to you that you want to get done today. So Jack does that and he says, okay, what next? And the time management guru says, okay, pick the top one and do it. And Jack does it. And he says, okay, what next? And the time management guru says, well, it doesn't really matter what else is next, right? You already did the most important thing of the day. You've done it. So when I heard that story, I thought, you know, it's kind of a simple concept, but it's not always easy to do the most important thing of the day. So today I want to share with you some tools that do help us prioritize what is most important to us, because it's really easy to be busy and to stay busy all day and not necessarily focus on the things that we want or need to do that are truly important to us. So a couple of reminders as we jump into our webinar. I will ask you to stay muted, and only because there's a good number of us and I want to reduce the background noise. So
some training, but what can I help you with?
And I can hear one of you right now, and for some reason I can't mute you. I think I did. Okay, thank you for that. Nope, I can still hear you. Wonder why I can't mute everyone. Michelle, if you can hear me okay, will you go into participants and click on the mute all?
That is a good question after what we've had.
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you. I'm not sure why it's not working for me.
I guess we probably need to check with her.
I will work on that for you.
She's out sick today.
All right.
Get her gallbladder
Moving
out.
on. This is going to be interesting.
But I could text her and ask her what she thinks, or if it's waiting
So
for the day to find out, or what.
I just want to let you all know we can hear, if one of you is on the phone, we can hear you, and I'm sorry to call you out, but you probably don't want to be heard. Okay, that sounds good. So stay muted and
wouldn't lose functionality here at the office.
Yeah, there it is.
With the laptop.
Not sure what to do.
The only thing she's got is she's able to keep that out of mind and out of sight down under her desk, and the laptop she'll probably stick somewhere up high. So
okay. Guys, if you'll hang on just a second, I'm going to see if I can go into our list.
Let me check with her. I'll make a note here to check with her and get back with you on that. Okay, sounds good.
Sorry, everyone, give me just a second. I'm going to mute.
An appraisal deal. Okay. Okay.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm having to go through each person and mute, except you, Michelle. I won't mute you.
Okay, right. It looks like he's muted now.
Okay. Thanks everyone for your patience. Okay, so this might sound like an oxymoron because I just asked you to mute yourself, but on the other hand, I would like you to participate. So there's going to be lots of polling and chat. I'd love for you to be involved. This is a hands-on webinar, as you'll see fairly soon. So let me pause and introduce myself and the company that Michelle and I come from. So directly from FCC Services. My name is Jeannie. I'm one of the directors of leadership development. Both Michelle and I oversee the leadership programs and some of the consulting services that we offer. And I'll be the main facilitator today, and I'm joined by my colleague, Michelle. And I'll ask Michelle to hop on the line and say hello.
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to another great webinar. If you've been to these before, you know I'll be working behind the scenes to try and help Jeannie along in terms of chat. So any questions that you have, I will try to make sure that we get them answered to the best of our ability. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. And as you all can see, when you're conducting a webinar with a large number of people, it's really nice to have a second person, especially for the technical stuff. So thank you, Michelle. All right, I am going to launch a poll, and this poll has to do with regrets. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I want this is based on research for people that are later on in their lives. What do you think the top regret was? So most common regret later in life. Oh, let me launch that. Here we go. If you don't see a poll box, you may need to move maybe the black video window around. All right, and I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so let me share the results with you. And I'll just go ahead and tell you what the most common answer. So first of all of these did come up as responses. When people later in their life were asked, all of these came up. However, the number one was the last one. I didn't live my life as I intended. And when I read that recently, I thought that is really a sad emotion. All of these, I guess, could be. And I feel like that's something that we can do something about. So I want to share some practical tips that help you prioritize your day, that eventually help prioritize your life, that can keep you on track of having the life that you intend. As Stephen Covey says to us in a quote, put first things first, just like Jack Welch did with his productivity guru. So now I'm going to ask you to do two things. I told you I was going to keep you busy away from that email. I'm going to launch another poll, and I would like you to find something to write on. So it can be any scrap piece of paper. It can actually, and if you don't have paper and pen nearby, you can also open up a Word doc or your phone if you want to enter in notes, but you need a little scrap piece of paper. And I will open up the next poll. So here we go. You've got two things to do. Answer the poll and grab a sheet of paper. Okay, so it looks like some of you can't hear me that well. Yeah, that's frustrating. I'm not sure what to do. I've got my modem right next to me. Let me know if it gets worse and maybe I can call in. Okay, yeah, some of you can and some of you can't hear me well. All right, I'm going to close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so how do you start? How do you start your workday? Yeah, 14 of you check your emails immediately. I hear you. 6 of you check your calendar. 6 of you plan your day. No one checks LinkedIn. And 9 of you do both, 3 and 4. Very good. Okay. So some of you are actually getting a pretty good start to your day, and we'll share some tips on how to do that. But some of you keep doing what you're doing. And I'll give you some tips to maybe improve how you're doing your planning. So thank you for that. If you have something to write on, what I would like you to do, and some of you have already done this today, is to create a list of everything you need to do today. If you have already created a list today, I'd like you to do a list tomorrow. So you choose either today, since it's already 2 or 3 or 4 for some of you. Yeah, thank you, Kevin. That might be better. Let me see if I can. Yeah. No. Okay, yeah, thank you for that suggestion. It might help to call in. Let me post the, let me see if there's a phone number. There should have been a phone number actually in the email, in the Zoom email. So I'm going to give you a minute to make a list today or tomorrow, to-do list. Give you just about another 30 seconds to do that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to set that aside for right now. We're going to come back to that list and do a few things with it. So set that aside for right now. And let's look at the two kind of key objectives for today. I'll call them the two key ideas for today. And the first one is to spend 5 minutes a day planning. And some of you are already doing that, which is great. It'll give you some tips on how you might adjust that just a tiny bit. So spend 5 minutes a day planning. And that comes to us from actually many sources, but the one that we're going to use is from a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen. And the next idea is include Q2 in your daily planning. And that comes to us from Stephen Covey. So we have these two key ideas that go together really well. Spend 5 minutes a day planning. That, however, is not enough. Make sure that you're also including Q2 in your planning. And some of you may be thinking, Jeannie, I have no idea what Q2 planning is. So we're going to learn what that is. I'm actually going to start there and talk about what is the Q1 and Q2 and all the different quadrants as far as prioritizing, because not everything that we do is a priority. So how do we know what's a priority? So let's jump into the time matrix. And I'm going to ask if you would, in your participant tool, tell me yes or no if you've ever heard of the Stephen Covey time matrix. His name is not Stephen Matrix. So in the participant, in the bar, if you'll open that up and click yes or no, if you have heard of Stephen Covey's matrix. Okay, so click yes or no. So, and that should be on the bottom of everyone's name. You'll see that feedback bar. Okay, looks like some of you have, some of you haven't. All right, excellent. So for those of you that have, we're going to use this in your daily planning. For those of you that have not, I'm going to introduce you to the concept. It's a really wonderful way to look at where you spend time in your day and how to prioritize it. So the time matrix is based on two factors. One is, how urgent is that task? Is it urgent or not urgent? That's one hand. And the other is, how important is that task? Is it important or not important? So let's look at the four quadrants in those two qualities. Quadrant one is the quadrant of what we call necessity. these are things in our life that are both urgent and important. They are the things that demand our attention. So they are anything from a small emergency to a large emergency. They can be our car breaking down. They can be a client that maybe we've lost some of their loan documentation. We don't know where it is. These are firefighting tasks, or they can be deadlines that we need to respond to. So these are things that demand our attention. They're urgent and they're important, and we need to respond to them, or our life is not going to be very comfortable. We need to respond to them. Let's go down to quadrant 3. Quadrant 3 are those tasks in our life that are urgent, not important. So they tend to be other people's meetings, or that are important to them, but they may not be important to us so much. They're emails that don't really relate to what we're working on, but we're sort of in this mass group of emails. They can be interruptions. These are tasks that we want to start avoiding, at least to some degree. Excuse me. And they're urgent, they're not important, so they make us feel busy, but not necessarily fulfilled. So let's look at now quadrant 4. Quadrant 4 are what I call the quadrant of excess or trivia. These are tasks in our life that are not urgent and are not important. They're kind of a waste of time. And they tend to be where we go to procrastinate. They are the 4th hour of TV. They are the 5th hour of video games. For me, they're the 2nd hour of online shopping or looking, or so they're where we go to sort of avoid what's going on in life. And they don't necessarily feel so good after a while. So this is not the, oh my gosh, Jeannie is saying we can't watch any TV. Not at all. In fact, we need those breaks. We need that time off. We need to switch our brains off for a while. This is where it's excess, where we've spent too much time and it no longer feels good anymore. So that's quadrant 4. Quadrant 2 is the quadrant of productivity. It's the quadrant of relationships. It's the quadrant of planning and preparing. These are tasks that are not urgent, but they're important. They make our life meaningful. And they are, they won't show up in our to-do list unless we plan for them. So that we have to be proactive in putting these as part of our calendar. So they are spending time with our friends and loved ones. They are spending time getting better at our job, whether it's taking a class, reading a book. They are planning for a meeting that we're delivering. They're planning for a presentation. It's that time invested that makes the meeting better, that makes the presentation better. So quadrant 2 is sort of an investment in time that we have to proactively schedule for. So those are the 4 quadrants. And I'm gonna ask that you kind of answer a little quiz to test your memory, test your knowledge of the 4 quadrants. So I'm going to show you an item in just a minute, and you share in chat which quadrant you think that shows up as. Okay, so here we go. So the first, and all you have to do is type in 1, 2, 3, or 4. So here's our first time task. So fixing an issue for an unhappy customer. Which quadrant would that fall under? All right, you got you got it. Yeah, that's a quadrant 1. So that's something that needs to be fixed. It demands our attention. Absolutely. All right, moving on. Taking a vacation. Absolutely. That's a Q2. That is a needed part of life. That's putting balance into our life, right? Giving us downtime away from work. Absolutely. Okay. Watching cat videos, funny cat videos for 3 hours. Some of those are pretty funny. Yeah, quadrant 4. You know, watching 1 or 2 videos, perfectly fine. Watching 3 hours, probably not so much. By the way, if we're spending a lot of time in quadrant 4, that can be a sign of depression, a sign of avoiding, yeah, what's going on in life for sure. All right, moving on. Attending a meeting with no agenda or no next steps. Yeah, for sure. Quadrant 3, that can feel like a waste of time, right? And just think if you had spent, or whoever the meeting facilitator was, if they had spent a little time planning, quadrant 2, a really good meeting makes a big difference. All right, 2 more. Taking your child to urgent care. Absolutely, that's a quadrant 1. That is a necessity. We have to take care of the things in quadrant 1, for sure. All right, last one. Reading an article about trends in your industry. Yeah, Q2, quadrant 2. Anything that helps you grow, that helps you develop, absolutely is a Q2. It's an investment. May not be urgent, but it's important. Yeah, very good. You guys got 4 out of, or not 4, there's more than that, but you did excellent. You all got A's. Let me pause and ask, what questions do you have about the 4 quadrants? We're going to look at how you use the 4 quadrants with your team. So let me pause and ask, is there anything that's not clear, anything not quite making sense for the 4 quadrants? All right, I'm going to watch chat and I'll ask Michelle to ask chat. So please enter those if you, how do you stay out of Q3? All right, I'm gonna open it up to the group. How do you stay out of Q3? I've got some ideas, and one starts with a short word that starts with N. Yeah, Lisa beat me to it. Yeah, how do you say no respectfully? And learning boundaries, especially with interruptions. Right now, while we're at home with COVID, with all the restrictions, learning how to say no with sharing a house with loved ones and they're interrupting. It might be a little tough, and yet we got to set those boundaries. Yeah, Michelle says, also, is there time to delegate? An opportunity for those of you who are leaders. Are some of these quadrant 3s an opportunity to delegate? Absolutely. All right, a couple more questions, but if you have more questions about the 4 quadrants, please enter them in chat. We'll keep checking. So here's a question for you all. What is the long-term impact on results and well-being of spending time in Q1? A lot of time in Q1. Yeah, burnout, stress. You could become reliable. You could be known as the fix-it person. Anxiety, exhaustion, yeah. So there's no way to live full-time in quadrant 1 in a healthy way. One way or another, if we're spending too much time there, there's going to be some aftermath on our health or well-being. And as Jennifer says, it can also impact your relationships and you can feel frazzled and exhausted. So another question, what compels us So if you find yourself fighting fires often, why? Why is it that we tend to, the last minute deadlines, the fixing things instead of doing them right the first time? What compels us to go to Q1? Ah, that's an interesting comment, Sean. Quick satisfaction. We'll talk about that in just a second. Right, not planning is also leads us to living in Q1. Lack of organization, too much time in Q3 or Q4. Hillary, that's an excellent observation, because we're not dealing with things that we need to in life, so we end up having to meet deadlines. So here's something that I want you all to think about. There are some people who love the adrenaline of Q1. You know, it's to come in at the last minute and meet that deadline, or fix something that needed to be redone or wasn't done well the first time. So there's sort of that that hero, come in and save the day. So for those of you who lead teams, I want you to ask yourself, are you rewarding the heroes, the firefighters, or are you rewarding the people who consistently come in on time, who prepare? It may not be really exciting or sexy, but it's how we get business done over time. So just ask yourself, you know, what are you rewarding? What are you recognizing? And it's easy to fall into that trap of recognizing the last minute hero. So just something to think about. If you have any comments about that, feel free to add those into chat also. All right, now on the flip side, what is the long-term impact of spending time in Q2? How does your work life look? How does your personal life look? What's the long-term impact? Yeah, more balanced, more relaxed. Yes, and you should be able to provide more value. You're doing more preparing, more planning, more organized, more productive. Absolutely. So I want to share, yeah, less stress in your daily life for sure. So I want to share with you something that you can do with your team. Whether you do this twice a year, whether you do this once a quarter, this is a good activity that you can sit down with your team and use the 4 quadrants. So first of all, you might have to explain the quadrants to them. So that would be a good learning transfer. You learn it today, you pass it along to them. So teach the 4 quadrants, and then do an assessment on quadrant 1 and 2 with your team, and I'll share that in just a second. Sometimes our teams in business, we fall under the trap of reacting and thinking that, you know what, we kind of live in quadrant 1 because we're waiting for the client to call, or the farmer to walk into the door and ask for a loan, or we're waiting for the numbers that were from the government. We feel like we're in a reactive mode all the time. But I want you all to think of even the firefighters across our nation. They react to fires, but they spend time, their downtime, preparing and training and cleaning their equipment and doing other things rather than just reacting. And yes, eating and sleeping and exercising also. But they spend time on their downtime preparing for the next fire, not fight. Being ready, getting their equipment, learning, training, etc. So I want you to do this with your team. Conduct a team Q1, Q2 assessment and ask these questions. Where as a team are we spending too much time in Q1 that are tasks that recurring? Where are we having to go back and fix things? Where are we having to constantly at the last minute meet a deadline? Where are we having to fix errors, or having to at the last minute come in and do things? Where is that recurring? So if anyone has something at the top of the mind, if you share that in chat, something that you've already identified in your work world that you see your team doing. What might that look like? What might be a Q1 that your team over time does more than once? Okay, so we have past due maturing loans and reacting to complete prior to the month end. Okay, so reacting at the month. So that end of the month must be fun when you're having to respond to that. Thank you, Erin. Yeah, if you're having the same customer service issue, whether it's turnaround time, whether it's quality. Thank you, Michelle, where there's a repeat of time, of quality. Craig says request to take the same days off around holidays, leaving staff low. Yeah, so again, if that occurs over and over, that would be a quadrant 1 where we're having to respond to it instead of planning for it and preparing for it. Okay, so thank you all for sharing. You all get the idea. So the next part of this is to think about with your team, again, it's a great team activity. What can we do proactively in Q2 that can at least reduce the Q1? You're never going to completely get rid of it. Q1 is part of life. There are always going to be some deadlines and some emergencies. However, if you're spending a lot of time there, what can your team do proactively that could help reduce those? So I'll give you an example of something that my team did in my last company. I was in the training and development arm of that company also, and we would wait for clients to call us up and say, we need this training, and then we'd have to respond, or we need this training, we'd have to react and design it and deliver it. And so what we started doing the last 2 years I was there was we started having these brainstorming sessions. We called them innovation tournaments. And we would come up with client solutions that our whole team came up with, and we'd vote on the top 3 that we would implement that year and say, these are the 3 things that we're going to focus on, and proactively offer them to our clients. So it was a fun brainstorming ideation meeting that we'd have at the beginning of the year. Again, that falls under the Q2, the planning, the strategy. So let me pause and ask, what questions do you have about maybe using Q2 with your team, Q1, Q2? This is just one activity. There could be more. Questions or comments you have? You can ignore that slide. It was a repeat. Okay, I'm going to move on to our next segment, but just know that Michelle and I are watching chat. So if a question comes in a little bit later, Michelle is always able to interrupt me at any time. So keep them coming. Okay, so now what? Now that we understand a little bit about the 4 quadrants, now what? What do we do with that? So now we want to talk about how do you use Q2 in your daily planning, spending 5 minutes of your day planning. So I'm pausing because I hear Kathy. Yeah, Kathy, I actually have a whole sheet on a how-to, and I'm happy to share that with you. If you don't mind sharing your email, if you're comfortable with that, in the chat, I'll ask Michelle to copy and paste that, and I'll send you the how-to. It is a really cool process. It's fun. Yeah, happy to do that. Okay. So in the words of Stephen Covey, the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, it's to schedule your priorities, to make sure that your daily planning includes your priorities. So some of you are already doing this, and you may like how you're doing it. I'll ask you just to think about it a little bit differently. So I call the daily plan the 3 C's. And the first thing is to capture everything you need to do that day, which some of you already did in the beginning of this webinar. So the first C is capture everything that you need to do that day. You can do it in the morning. I tend to do my 5 minutes in the morning. If you prefer to do it in the evening while you're wrapping up your day, that's fine. You just kind of want to do that brain dump. However, whatever timing is preferable to you. Then you want to look at your list and check for Q2 items. So they're not all Q1 or they're not all Q3, if there's actually Q2 in there. And then I'm going to ask you to clarify at least one of those items that's on the list. So we're going to do actually 2 of these now, because some of you already did the first one. So if you'll grab your list, and I want you to revisit your list. And for those of you who maybe have missed this part, we did this in the very beginning. And if you miss this, it's absolutely okay. Don't worry about doing it. What I will ask you that you'll do the next step onward. But for those of you who did do it, revisit and count how many Q2 tasks are on it. And if you want to write that in chat, please do. Meanwhile, I'm copying these email addresses. Yes, I will send you. Hillary, thank you for being so honest. All right, so we have some. Sorry, that's my water bottle. Wow, Alicia, that's a lot. You definitely get the Q2. Yeah, Clarissa says too, but likely won't get them as planned. Gotcha. Okay, so I'm going to offer something that might help a little bit. Okay, so for those of you who did the list, you can use one of those. If you have a Q2 on there, you can use one of those for these next steps. And for those of you that didn't even get a chance to do that, you can start from here on. So you probably will need either a piece of scrap paper, or you can do this in a Word doc, or you can do this on your phone, but grab something to write on. All right, and I want you all to think of the most pressing, unfulfilled, or unfinished Q2 commitment that you have in your life right now. So that could be something from your list, or it could be something that you've kind of been walking around and it's in your head, and it's something that you either want to start or you want to finish, and it's important to you, but it hasn't necessarily been urgent. So I'll give you some examples. It can be a work issue. Maybe it's a team quality issue that's repeating but hasn't been resolved, so it needs resolution. Maybe it's a tough conversation you need to have with a loved one, a neighbor, a family member, a colleague, one of those tough conversations we tend to avoid. Or maybe it's an unfinished personal project, or a personal project you want to start. So go ahead, and I'm going to give you a second. Write that down. Okay, a couple more seconds there. All right. So hopefully you have something written down. And what I'm going to ask you to do next is to visualize what the end of that project or commitment looks like. So write down a single sentence that represents the resolution or the completion or the finish of that commitment or project. So go back to some of these examples. So let's look at, again, that team issue around quality that needs resolution. So what might the end look like? Implementation of the best solution. Okay, we implemented what we thought was the best solution. Great. Let's look at an unfinished personal project. What might that be? A clean garage. So visualize what the end of that looks like and try to encapsulate that in one sentence. The resolution of that commitment. Give you another minute. Okay. Kathy, I'm reading your comment. Example of my Q2 is contacting members. This creates mostly Q3 follow-ups. Are they Q3 because they feel busy but not important? Gotcha. Could someone else do them? Are they important to your client? By the way, Kathy brings up a really interesting point. Sometimes things that are Q1 or 2 for other people, so they're important. So for example, let's say my vice president has a project that's very important to her. It's Q1 or Q2. To me, it's like, I don't really care that much, but if it's important to her, I'm going to make it important to me because I want to have a good working relationship. So sometimes in life, it's okay to make your Q1 and Q2 the same as your loved ones. Or I'm sorry, my vice president is not my loved one, but she's my manager. So it's important to her. I'm going to make it important to me also. Probably the same thing with some of my family members. Let me know if y'all have any other thoughts on that. Please feel free to share in chat. Now, if all of my work is not important, or excuse me, all of the things that my vice president, excuse me, there's some background, hang on. Try to mute. If a lot of things that are important to my manager are not important to me, then that's another quite a discussion that I might not be in the right job. And I don't mean that in your case, but yeah, sometimes we just make some sacrifices. Okay, so now we come to the third step, and this is what's going to show up in your daily planning. So the next part of this is to identify, excuse me, the very next physical action that you must take to move forward on this commitment. So you visualize the ending of it, and now what we want to add for our daily planning is what is the very next step? What is the one action you need to take, the next action to move forward? So for example, let's go back to our team quality issue. We decided that the end is implementation of the best solution, okay, and quality issues go away. What is my next action? It's to schedule a team meeting to define the issue, okay? That's all I'm going to do today, and yet that is a step forward. Let's go to our clean garage. The end is a clean garage. What am I going to do today? Buy large trash bags. It's a very specific one action task that I'm going to put on my plan. So now your turn. Write down the very next physical action you need to take towards your commitment, your Q2 commitment. One tip is the more specific it is, the more likely you are to do it. So get really specific, really simple, one action. Okay, the reason why I have these pictures, actually forgot I put these in here, but I'll share with you. So years ago, my sister and I talked about doing mosaic artwork. So we had done some mosaic work together, and we talked about having a side business. So actually kind of getting serious about it and doing it as a side business. And we would work together for a while, and then we would get busy, and then we would get together in the studio, and then we'd get busy, and we weren't really spending a ton of time doing it. And finally, I just made this one action, and I said, okay, every Wednesday night, I'm going to put on my calendar, let's get together and work in the studio for 2 hours a night. And it was just sort of that one action that turned around. We spent the next 4 years making art together and doing some art shows together. And sometimes it's sort of that simple, okay, put it on the calendar. Every Wednesday, we're going to get together. Not always easy, I know, with life, but sometimes it's just, what is the next step we need to take? So sometimes when projects feel big, they feel overwhelming, just focus on kind of what's the next step that will move me forward, or that will move my partner and I forward. And that's what you focus on. That helps reduce some stress. So in chat, excusez-moi, 2 questions here. This question, why does writing down these steps tend to reduce stress? Because the funny thing is, you haven't actually done the project, you haven't done the task, you've just written it down. Why does that action alone? Yeah, Helen says you have a plan of action. It clears your mind. It takes it from here onto your paper or onto your whatever task app you want to use. You have at least acknowledged what you need to do. Right, Christine says it's step 1. It's one step forward. And it's also focusing not on the large commitment and the problem. It focuses on the your commitment on what you're going to do. Right, proposes a commitment. Reminds you of the plan and the chaos of the day. Yeah. So for those of you who are already planning, you're already spending 5 minutes of your day, kudos to you. Keep doing it, capture, and then also clarify. And the clarifying part is that what's that next step? What is that single action next step that you need to do? If you find that your daily planning is, it's good, it's just sometimes you're not getting things done, or they're too big, the steps are too big, try that, breaking it down into the very, very next step, the one action. For those of you that have not started planning your day and you're jumping into email first, it's very, very easy to jump into email. I still have to stop myself from doing that, but I promise you, your day gets off to a better start if you pause and commit 5 minutes to daily planning. I use both a planner. I do my actually weekly planning in here, which we haven't talked about. That's a whole nother segment. And then I do my daily planning in an app called Trello. So for those of you who have an app that you like, would you share that in chat? If you're using some kind of organizational or task or productivity tool, share that in chat. That would be lovely. And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask you another question about forming this as a habit. Because as Aristotle points out, we are what we repeatedly do, day after day after day. Excellence is not an act. It's not a one-time thing, it's a habit. So I'm going to launch our last poll. How many days does it take to form a habit? Kathy, that's a great question. Trello, I like it because it's on my computer and it's simple to use, and it also allows me to click and drag. So I have a list and I can click and drag it to the done or the doing. And it's also visually really, I can make it pretty because I'm a visual person. But honestly, using your calendar is a simple and fine way to do it also. All right, I'm going to end the poll, and some of you all may be surprised. So yeah, I used to think it was 21 days. We learned that in many workshops. It's 21 days. It's actually anywhere between 12 and 254. It depends. It depends on the habit. It depends on the person. It depends on your environment. So I wish I could tell you that if you did this for 3 weeks, it's going to be a habit for sure. I can't promise you that. But what I would like you to share in chat is, how will you remind yourself tomorrow morning, instead of jumping into email, how will you remind yourself to spend 5 minutes planning till you get to the point where you don't need that reminder? How are you going to remind yourself? Okay, so Lisa's sharing, I schedule 15 minutes every morning and 30, yeah, that 30 minutes on a Friday afternoon is a nice week wrap up. Moleskin notebook and Clever Fox Planner. Clarissa, is Clever Fox Planner an app, or is that a paper product? Sticky. Lisa says sticky note on my computer. If that works, okay. Okay, it's paper, gotcha. Okay, so here's how Hillary's going to remind herself. Set alarm, 10 minutes early and have that cup of coffee. I love that. Create that kind of ritual. Coffee in your planning, very nice. Nathan says, I'll set up an automatic email. But then you have to check your email, Nathan. Reminding you, okay, as long as you don't get into your email and start reading. By the way, I want to, in all seriousness, because I'm just as guilty, if I say, well, let me just check my email really quick, you all know what happens. You jump into email and 20 minutes later, you're still responding to email. So I really, really encourage you all to try, before you dive into email, just take a minute. If you need to check your calendar, do that. But otherwise, pause, have your coffee, and do your planning first before you go into the reactive mode. Alrighty, so in our final wrap up, it's been lovely to spend some time with you all, and I hope you've gotten some tips on spending 5 minutes daily planning, whether it's in the morning or in the afternoon. Along with that daily planning, really pause and look at your Q2. Are you involving the priorities in your life? What's important to you? Is that part of your daily plan to create that balance and help you prioritize what's really important in your life? Before we do that in chat, because that's your go away, I do want to let you know that coming soon, we're going to offer, we being FCC Services, we're going to offer the whole program of Getting Things Done. It's a very cool online on-demand workshop that is also integrated with some live virtual sessions. So you'll see some more information about the whole program, and you get some really neat materials along with the with your workshop registration. So here's your here's your last question, and once you type this into chat, you are free to go. This is your ticket out, and Michelle and I will be hanging on for a couple minutes just to see if there's any questions or comments. But in your chat, if you'll share what's your biggest takeaway from today. And thank you for sharing that, and goodbye to all of you, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you for sharing your last thought.